The encounter at the airport. The airport thrummed with the hum of travel, an orchestra of rolling luggage, murmured conversations, and periodic announcements that echoed through the terminal. Amid the busy crowd, Dr. Mia Anderson moved with purpose. Her tailored emerald suit fit impeccably, complemented by her understated gold jewelry. Her demeanor exuded confidence, yet her kind smile softened the edges of her commanding presence. Mia was no stranger to airports, but today was different. She had an important meeting in New York, one that could redefine her career, and perhaps her life. Gripping the handle of her vintage suitcase, she approached the check-in counter. At the desk stood two airline employees, a young woman with a ponytail, whose name tag read Beth, and an older man, Mark, whose bored expression suggested he'd seen one too many travelers today. As Mia handed her first-class ticket to Beth, she noticed the faint shift in the young woman's posture, a slight straightening, a momentary pause before she scanned the ticket. Beth's eyes darted between the ticket and Mia, her polite smile faltering. "Flying first class today, are we?" Beth's voice was light, but the undercurrent of disbelief was unmistakable. "That's correct," Maya replied, her tone even. Beth hesitated, then called over Mark. "Hey, can you double-check this?" she said, her words loud enough to draw glances from nearby travelers. Mark took the ticket, his weathered hands holding it up to the light as though inspecting a forgery. He grunted, then handed it back with a smirk. "Guess it checks out," he said with a shrug, his voice dripping with condescension. Mia kept her composure, taking the ticket without meeting his gaze. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. She proceeded to the luggage drop-off area, where another attendant, a wiry man with a distracted air, grabbed her suitcase and threw it onto the conveyor belt with a carelessness that made her wince. The bag landed awkwardly, tilting before slamming onto its side. "Excuse me," Maya said firmly, stepping closer. "Please handle that more carefully." The man barely looked at her. "It's just luggage," he muttered, his tone dismissive. Mia inhaled deeply, willing herself to remain calm. "It's also my property," she replied, her voice sharp but controlled. The attendant gave a half-hearted shrug, muttering something under his breath as he adjusted the bag. Maya stepped back, her chest tightening with frustration. By the time she reached the security checkpoint, Mia's patience was wearing thin. Yet, she reminded herself why she was here. This meeting wasn't just about her. It was about the vision she had worked tirelessly to bring to life. She couldn't let the day's microaggressions derail her focus. At the security line, the TSA agent scrutinized her ID longer than necessary, his eyes flicking between her and the card with an air of suspicion. "Where are you headed today?" he asked, his tone flat. "New York," Maya answered curtly. "Business or pleasure?" "Business." The agent nodded slowly, as if weighing her response, before finally letting her pass. As Mia walked toward the gate, she felt the weight of dozens of small judgments trailing behind her like an invisible cloud. She adjusted the strap of her handbag and lifted her chin. She had faced worse than this, and she would rise above it now. At the boarding gate, the trend continued. The gate agent, a burly man named Stan, scanned her ticket with exaggerated deliberation. "Flying first class, huh?" he said, his tone almost playful, but not quite. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, her gaze unwavering. "No problem at all," Stan replied, though his smirk said otherwise. He waved her through, but as Mia stepped into the jet bridge, she heard him whisper to his colleague, "Must have hit the jackpot somewhere." The comment stung, but Mia didn't react. She boarded the plane, finding her seat in the front cabin. The plush leather seat was as comfortable as she had imagined, but the glances from the flight attendants soured the experience. One of them, a woman named Claire, approached her shortly after she had settled in. "Ma'am, can I see your ticket again?" Claire asked, her voice clipped. Mia handed it over, keeping her expression neutral. Claire inspected the ticket as if expecting to find a mistake, then handed it back with a tight smile. "Enjoy your flight," she said, though the words rang hollow. Maya thanked her and turned to look out the window, hoping to find some solace in the view. Instead, her eyes fell on the luggage handlers below. Her stomach clenched as she saw one of them toss her suitcase onto the cart with alarming force. The bag tumbled, landing on its side again, and Mia could see that the zipper was barely holding it shut. She pressed the call button above her seat. A flight attendant named Greg arrived, his expression already strained with impatience. "Yes?" Greg asked. "That's my suitcase down there," Maya said, pointing out the window. "It's being mishandled, and it looks damaged." Greg glanced out the window, then shrugged. "It'll be fine," he said dismissively. "They're just suitcases." "It's not just a suitcase," Maya said, her voice firm. "It's my property, and I expect it to be treated with care." Greg sighed. "I'll make a note," he said, turning away before she could respond. Mia leaned back in her seat, her frustration simmering just beneath the surface. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. This was only the beginning of the day, and she had to stay focused. After all, this flight wasn't just a trip. It was the first step towards something far greater than any of them could imagine. A storm of subtle injustices. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, Mia Anderson shifted in her first-class seat, attempting to find comfort not just in the plush leather, but in her own thoughts. She kept her gaze fixed on the window, where rain began to streak across the glass, blurring the cityscape she was leaving behind. The rain felt symbolic, a washing away of the microaggressions she had endured so far today, or so she hoped. The flight attendants bustled about, their polite smiles and rehearsed voices addressing the other passengers with enthusiasm. When they reached Mia, the warmth seemed to cool by several degrees. A stewardess with perfectly coiffed hair and a pinched expression paused beside her. "Ma'am," she said, her voice brisk, "would you like a beverage before takeoff?" Mia glanced at the menu in her hand and responded, "A sparkling water, please." The stewardess nodded curtly and turned away, but Mia couldn't help noticing how she lingered at the next passenger's seat, a middle-aged man in a business suit, engaging him in friendly conversation about his day. Mia exhaled and turned her attention back to the window. The faint tension in her shoulders reminded her of every other instance like this. It wasn't the overt acts of disrespect that wore her down, but the countless subtle dismissals, each one a drop of water carving away at her patience. When the plane reached cruising altitude, the same stewardess returned, placing Maya's sparkling water on the tray table without a word. The glass clinked loudly as it landed, and a few drops splashed over the rim. Mia caught the woman's eye. "Thank you," Maya said, her tone polite but firm. The stewardess offered a tight smile, then walked away without acknowledging her words. Mia sipped her drink, willing herself to relax. She thought of the meeting awaiting her in New York. It wasn't just another business proposal. It was a culmination of years of tireless work and unyielding determination. The funding she was about to secure would take her company, a biotech firm focused on underserved communities, to the next level. She had every reason to celebrate, yet the weight of the day's interactions dulled the triumph she should have felt. An unwelcome incident. 2 hours into the flight, Mia decided to stretch her legs. As she made her way toward the restroom, she noticed one of the flight attendants, Greg, leaning against the galley wall. He was chatting with Claire, the same stewardess who had been cold to Mia earlier. They didn't notice her approaching. "I'm telling you," Greg said, his voice low but not low enough. "She's got to be someone's guest or something. No way she bought that ticket herself." Claire smirked. "Maybe she's one of those charity cases. You know, some promotional thing the airline's running." Mia froze mid-step, the words washing over her like a cold tide. She stood still, out of their line of sight, but close enough to hear every word. "First class isn't what it used to be," Greg continued, shaking his head. "Anyone can sit here now." Claire laughed lightly, her tone dripping with disdain. Mia felt her jaw tighten, her hands curling into fists at her sides. She took a slow, deliberate breath and stepped forward, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. Both Greg and Claire straightened, their eyes widening as they realized she had overheard them. "Excuse me," Maya said, her voice calm but sharp enough to slice through their feigned professionalism. "Am I interrupting something?" Greg stammered. "Oh, no, ma'am, not at all. We were just—" "Good," Mia cut him off, "because I was on my way to the restroom and couldn't help but hear my name mentioned." Claire's cheeks flushed, and she glanced away, mumbling something unintelligible. Mia stared at them for a moment longer, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably before turning and continuing down the aisle. She didn't look back, but she could feel their embarrassed gazes on her back. In the restroom, she splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the small mirror. She wasn't angry anymore. She was resolute. These moments, these battles, were not new. They were simply reminders of why she had to keep pushing, why her success mattered not just to her, but to others who faced the same prejudices every day. The landing. A shift in focus. When the plane finally landed in New York, Maya stayed seated, allowing the other passengers to disembark first. She used the extra time to center herself. Whatever slights she had endured on this journey were behind her now. What lay ahead was far more important. As the cabin emptied, Greg and Claire passed by her seat on their way to the front of the plane. Neither of them met her gaze, their earlier bravado replaced with an awkward silence. When it was finally her turn to leave, Maya retrieved her carry-on bag from the overhead compartment and walked toward the exit with the same grace she had when she arrived. Her heels clicked against the floor of the jet bridge, each step deliberate and unhurried. At the terminal, she was greeted by her assistant, Jordan, who stood waiting with an umbrella and a bright smile. "Dr. Anderson," Jordan said, his tone warm and professional. "Everything's ready for the press conference. The executives are waiting in the lounge." Mia nodded, her composure intact despite the whirlwind of emotions still swirling within her. "Let's go," she said. As they walked toward the executive lounge, Mia glanced out the large glass windows of the terminal. On the tarmac below, she spotted her suitcase again. This time, it was being carried carefully by a luggage handler who seemed far more attentive than the one from earlier. She allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps not everyone in the system was blind to respect and dignity. Unveiling the power of resilience. Maya stepped into the executive lounge, the hum of voices inside quieting as heads turned toward her. The polished, modern space was a stark contrast to the chaotic terminal outside. A long glass table sat at the center, surrounded by sleek chairs, where several executives were already seated. At the head of the table stood Robert Langston, the CEO of the airline. His sharp suit and commanding presence radiated authority, but when his gaze landed on Mia, it softened into something resembling admiration. "Dr. Anderson," he said, stepping forward to greet her with an outstretched hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." "The pleasure is mine," Maya replied, shaking his hand firmly. Her voice was calm, carrying the weight of someone who knew her worth. As introductions were made around the table, Mia's keen eyes caught subtle shifts in expression from a few of the executives. Some offered genuine smiles, but others couldn't quite mask their surprise. She had grown used to this, the raised eyebrows, the quiet assessments, the lingering disbelief. It was a testament to her resilience that these moments no longer rattled her. Robert gestured to an empty chair near the head of the table. "Shall we begin?" he said. Mia took her seat, placing her tablet and notebook on the table in front of her. The meeting commenced with Robert reviewing the agenda, outlining the airline's plans for the upcoming quarter. It was a standard corporate preamble, but Mia's mind was already focused on her moment to speak. The presentation. When it was her turn, Mia rose from her chair with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime earning her place in rooms like this. She moved to the front of the room, connecting her tablet to the screen behind her. The presentation illuminated the wall, a sleek slideshow detailing her company's mission and vision. As many of you know, Mia began, her voice steady and clear. Anderson Biotech was founded with a singular purpose: to bridge the gap in healthcare access for underserved communities. She clicked to the next slide, which displayed a map of the United States with highlighted regions. These areas represent communities where healthcare is not just insufficient, it's non-existent for many. Our goal is to change that by providing innovative, affordable solutions. The room was silent, the attention of every executive fixed on her. We've developed a new line of portable diagnostic tools, Mia continued, clicking to the next slide, which showcased a sleek, compact device. These tools can be deployed in remote areas, providing accurate medical diagnostics in minutes. They're cost-effective, easy to use, and have the potential to save countless lives. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Then, with deliberate pacing, she shifted the focus. "This partnership with your airline is critical," she said. "With your extensive network and resources, we can ensure that these tools reach the communities that need them most, not just in the United States, but globally. Together, we can redefine what it means to serve." As she concluded, she looked out at the room, her gaze unwavering. "This isn't just a business opportunity. It's a chance to make a lasting impact. And I believe this airline has the vision and the heart to be a part of that change." The reaction. The room erupted in applause. Even those who had been skeptical seemed genuinely impressed. Robert Langston stood, his expression a mixture of pride and excitement. "Dr. Anderson," he said, stepping forward, "your vision aligns perfectly with the values we're striving to uphold as a company. I believe I speak for everyone here when I say we're fully committed to this partnership." Mia allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Langston. I look forward to what we can accomplish together." As the meeting transitioned into discussions of logistics and next steps, Maya felt a sense of validation wash over her. Every hurdle, every doubt cast upon her, had led to this moment. But the day wasn't over yet. The unexpected announcement. As the executives filed out of the room, Robert approached Mia. "There's one more thing before you go," he said. "Oh," Maya replied, tilting her head in curiosity. Robert gestured toward the large windows overlooking the runway. "I wanted to personally introduce you to our staff. They've been briefed about this partnership and are eager to meet you." Mia hesitated for a moment, her earlier interactions with the airline staff flashing through her mind. She could still hear the dismissive tone of the gate agent, the whispers from the flight attendants. "Of course," she said finally, her professional demeanor firmly in place. They walked together to a smaller conference room where a group of staff members had gathered. Maya recognized a few faces immediately: Beth, the check-in attendant; Mark, the older man from the ticket counter; and Greg, the flight attendant who had dismissed her earlier concerns. Their expressions shifted as they saw her enter the room, a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Facing the team, Robert stepped forward, addressing the group. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Dr. Mia Anderson, the founder and CEO of Anderson Biotech, and the architect of our new partnership initiative. This collaboration will not only elevate our company's mission, but also bring tangible benefits to communities around the world." The staff clapped, though the applause from some was hesitant. Beth and Greg exchanged a nervous glance, their earlier behavior clearly weighing on them. Maya stepped forward, her presence commanding the room. She looked at each staff member in turn, her expression neutral but firm. "I'm excited to work with all of you," she said. "This partnership is about more than just business. It's about setting a new standard for how we serve others. And that starts with how we treat each other." Her words hung in the air, the unspoken rebuke landing precisely where it was needed. Beth shifted uncomfortably, while Greg avoided her gaze altogether. The revelation. As the staff began to disperse, Robert turned to Mia. "I hope that went well," he said with a chuckle. "It did," Maya replied, her voice calm. "But there's still work to do." Robert nodded. "I agree." Culture change takes time, but with leaders like you, I'm confident we'll get there." Mia smiled politely, but her thoughts were already elsewhere. As she walked back through the terminal, her heels clicking against the polished floor, she felt the weight of the day lifting. This wasn't just about her success. It was about reshaping perceptions, one encounter at a time. The power of visibility. Mia stood by the large glass windows overlooking the bustling tarmac, watching as planes taxied and luggage carts weaved through the maze of activity. The terminal was quieter now, the late afternoon lull settling over the space. Her meeting with the executives had concluded, the partnership secured, and the introductions to the staff had been made. Yet the lingering weight of the day's events refused to fade entirely. Her assistant, Jordan, approached her with a soft smile. "Dr. Anderson, you were incredible in there," he said, his admiration genuine. "The executives are already buzzing about the potential impact of the partnership." Mia returned his smile, appreciating the encouragement. "Thank you, Jordan. But it's not just about impressing executives. It's about making sure the message reaches every part of the organization." Jordan nodded, sensing her deeper meaning. "You mean the culture." "Exactly," Mia said. She turned back to the window, her gaze sharpening. Today was a reminder that success isn't just about sitting at the table. It's about ensuring that others recognize why you deserve to be there in the first place. Jordan hesitated for a moment before asking, "Do you think it made a difference? Meeting with the staff, I mean." Mia's lips pressed into a thoughtful line. "I think it's a start. But change doesn't happen overnight." A chance encounter. As they began to move toward the exit, a faint commotion near the luggage carousel caught Mia's attention. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring amongst themselves. At the center of the group stood a woman clutching a broken suitcase, its contents spilling onto the floor. Mia's heart sank as she recognized the distinctive black and gold trim of the bag. It was hers. "Excuse me," she said to Jordan, quickening her pace toward the scene. The luggage attendant, a tall man with a sheepish expression, was awkwardly attempting to explain the situation to the woman. "I'm sorry, man," he stammered. "It must have been damaged during handling." Mia stepped forward, her presence immediately commanding attention. "That's my suitcase," she said firmly. The attendant turned to her, his eyes widening in recognition. "Dr. Anderson, I—" Mia raised a hand, cutting him off. "This isn't just about a broken suitcase. This is about carelessness and a lack of respect for people's property. Would you treat the belongings of a senior executive this way?" The man's face reddened, and he looked down at the floor. "No, ma'am. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what?" Mia pressed, her tone calm but unyielding. "That the person behind the suitcase deserved the same respect as anyone else." The crowd around them had grown, their curiosity palpable. Beth, the check-in attendant, and Greg, the flight attendant, were among them, their expressions a mix of guilt and discomfort. Turning the moment into a lesson, Mia glanced at the crowd, her voice carrying the clarity and authority of a seasoned leader. "This isn't just about my luggage," she said. "It's about the larger issue of how we treat people, especially those we think won't push back. Respect shouldn't be reserved for titles or appearances. It should be a baseline for how we interact with everyone." Her words hung in the air, resonating with the onlookers. The luggage attendant nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her truth. "I'm sorry, Dr. Anderson," he said. "It won't happen again." Mia softened her tone, but kept her gaze steady. "I appreciate your apology, but make sure your actions align with your words going forward." She turned to Jordan. "Let's get this sorted. I have another bag to replace this one." A ripple of change. As Mia and Jordan moved toward the exit, Beth and Greg approached her hesitantly. "Dr. Anderson," Beth began, her voice wavering slightly. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how I treated you earlier. It was unprofessional, and I see now how wrong it was." Greg nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "Me too. I shouldn't have made assumptions or said what I did. I'm sorry." Mia regarded them for a moment, considering her response. "Acknowledging your mistakes is the first step," she said. "But the real change comes from what you do next. Treat every passenger with the respect and dignity they deserve, regardless of who they are or what you assume about them." Both employees nodded earnestly. "Thank you for giving us this chance to learn," Beth added. Mia offered them a small smile. Growth is always possible, as long as you're willing to embrace it. The power of being seen. Later that evening, as Mia sat in the back seat of the car taking her to her hotel, she reflected on the day's events. The partnership with the airline was a major milestone for her company, but it was the smaller victories that stood out in her mind. The moments of quiet courage, the opportunities to teach and inspire, and the power of visibility. Being seen wasn't just about recognition. It was about breaking down barriers and challenging perceptions. It was about showing others, especially those who doubted her, that her presence wasn't just valid, it was necessary. As the city lights blurred past the window, Mia allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The road ahead would still be challenging, but she had never been one to shy away from a challenge. This was only the beginning. Transforming the system. The following morning, Mia Anderson woke with a clear purpose. The events of the previous day lingered in her mind, but rather than weighing her down, they fueled her determination. Today wasn't just about the partnership itself. It was about ensuring that the change she envisioned took root within the culture of the airline. Mia sat in the executive suite of her hotel, her tablet propped up as she reviewed the agenda for the airline's annual staff summit. As part of her agreement with the partnership, she had insisted on addressing the broader team. This wasn't in the original plan, but Mia had made it clear to Robert Langston, the airline CEO, that the collaboration wouldn't be complete without a cultural shift. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Jordan entered, his ever-present professionalism accompanied by an excited energy. "Dr. Anderson, the car is ready. The summit begins in an hour," he said. Mia closed her tablet and stood, smoothing the lapels of her fitted gray blazer. "Let's make an impact today," she said. The summit. The staff summit was held in a sprawling conference center near the airline's headquarters. Hundreds of employees had gathered, representing every department, from flight attendants and ground crew to executives and customer service staff. The buzz of conversation filled the room as Mia and Jordan arrived, drawing curious glances from the crowd. As the morning sessions concluded, Robert Langston took to the stage to introduce Mia. His speech was polished and professional, highlighting her achievements and the significance of the partnership. When he finally invited Mia to the stage, the audience erupted into polite applause, though there was an undercurrent of curiosity. Many were unsure what to expect. Mia approached the podium with measured steps, her posture straight, her presence commanding. She took a moment to scan the room, meeting the eyes of the people who made up the airline's workforce. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and resonant. "I'm honored to be here with all of you today. I'd like to start by sharing a story." The room quieted, the audience leaning in slightly. "A story of persistence. When I was young," Mia began, "I often accompanied my grandmother to the small clinic in our neighborhood. The clinic was understaffed, underfunded, and overwhelmed. Patients would sit for hours, sometimes days, waiting to be seen. But what struck me most was the way people treated my grandmother when she spoke up about the lack of care. They dismissed her as if her voice didn't matter, as if her presence was an inconvenience." Mia paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. "That experience shaped me. It taught me two things: the importance of access to health care and the resilience required to demand respect in spaces where it's often withheld." She looked out at the audience, her gaze unwavering. "And those lessons have stayed with me throughout my career." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, which displayed an image of one of her company's diagnostic devices in use in a remote clinic. "This is why I started Anderson Biotech," she said, "to ensure that people like my grandmother and so many others, never have to feel invisible when seeking the care they deserve. Addressing the elephant in the room. Mia shifted her tone, making it more conversational. But today, I want to talk about something more immediate, something that affects all of us here in this room. It's about how we treat one another. The air in the room seemed to thicken as the audience sensed the direction she was heading. Yesterday, during my journey here, I experienced moments of doubt, not in myself, but in the way others perceived me. There were questions, subtle comments, and actions that reminded me of the barriers we still face, even in 2024. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and Mia held up a hand to quiet them. "This isn't about pointing fingers," she said. "It's about acknowledging that culture matters, respect matters, and the small actions we take every day contribute to the environment we create." The call to action. Mia clicked to the next slide, which displayed the airline's mission statement: to connect the world with care and excellence. "This mission is admirable," she said, "but care and excellence don't just happen in the air or in your customer interactions. They start here, within your teams. They start with how you treat your colleagues, your passengers, and yes, even your luggage." The audience chuckled lightly at the last comment, easing some of the tension in the room. "I believe this airline has the potential to set a new standard, not just for service, but for inclusivity and respect. But that requires all of you to look inward and ask yourselves hard questions. Are you contributing to a culture that uplifts everyone, or are you perpetuating behaviors that tear people down?" Her words were met with a mix of nods and thoughtful expressions. A vision for the future. Mia closed her presentation with a powerful message. Change is never easy, but it's always possible. And it starts with leadership, not just at the executive level, but from every person who takes pride in their role, no matter how big or small. My challenge to you is this: be the example. Show others what it means to embody care and excellence in everything you do. The room erupted into applause, this time more genuine and sustained. Maya stepped back from the podium, allowing the moment to wash over her. The seeds of transformation. As the summit continued, several employees approached Mia, thanking her for her words and sharing their own stories. Among them were Beth and Greg, who both reiterated their earlier apologies and expressed a desire to do better. "It's not just words for us," Greg said earnestly. "You've made us see things differently." Mia nodded, appreciating their sincerity. "It's a process," she said. "The important thing is that you're willing to grow." By the end of the day, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for the partnership, but for the conversation she had sparked. She knew that true change would take time, but she also knew that the seeds had been planted. As the sun set over the city, Mia reflected on the day. Her journey had never been easy, but moments like this made it all worthwhile. She wasn't just transforming a company, she was helping to shape a better world. Strengthening the roots of change. After the summit's conclusion, Maya lingered in the conference center, answering questions and engaging in conversations with employees from all levels of the organization. She understood that lasting change required more than a single speech or an inspiring message. It required connection. A member of the ground crew, a young woman named Lila, approached her hesitantly. She held her cap in her hands, twisting it nervously. "Dr. Anderson, I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "Hearing you talk about respect, it really hit home for me. Sometimes, working on the tarmac, it feels like we're invisible to everyone else." Mia smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on Layla's shoulder. "Layla, the work you do is vital. Without the ground crew, none of this would function. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." Layla's eyes shone with gratitude. "I'll remember that," she said. Breaking down barriers. As Mia moved through the crowd, she found herself in a candid conversation with a group of flight attendants. They shared their experiences, frustrations, and hopes for the future of the airline. One of them, a man named Javier, spoke openly. "We've been trained to deliver exceptional service to our passengers, but no one talks about how we should treat each other behind the scenes," he said. "Your words today made me realize we need to hold ourselves to the same standard." Mia nodded thoughtfully. Culture starts from within. If you create an environment of respect and support among yourselves, that energy will naturally extend to the passengers you serve. Javier smiled. "I'm going to bring this up at our next team meeting. We can do better." A moment of reflection. Later that evening, Maya returned to her hotel room, her mind buzzing with the events of the day. She sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. Her phone buzzed with a message from Robert Langston. "Robert Langston. Mia, I just wanted to thank you again for speaking today. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. You've inspired a lot of people." Maya replied with a brief but heartfelt message. "Mia, thank you, Robert. Inspiration is just the first step. Let's make sure we follow through with action." As she set her phone down, Maya thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had faced countless obstacles, from doubters and detractors to systemic challenges. But she had also found allies, people willing to listen, learn, and grow, planting seeds of accountability. The following morning, Mia met with Robert and the airline's leadership team for a follow-up discussion. She emphasized the importance of integrating her message into the company's policies and training programs. "This isn't just about making people feel good for a day," Maya said. "It's about embedding these principles into the DNA of your organization. Respect, inclusivity, and care. These need to be more than just buzzwords. They need to be actionable." Robert agreed. "We'll start by revising our employee training programs to include these elements, and I'd like to invite you to be a part of that process." Mia smiled. "I'd be honored." The ripple effect. Over the next few months, the partnership between Anderson Biotech and the airline became a model of collaboration and progress. New training programs were rolled out, emphasizing the values Mia had championed. Employees began sharing stories of small but meaningful changes in their interactions, both with each other and with passengers. The culture of the airline slowly but surely began to shift, and through it all, Maya remained involved, offering guidance and ensuring that the progress they made was sustainable. As the partnership grew stronger, so did Mia's conviction that change was not only possible but inevitable when driven by courage and integrity. She had turned a moment of adversity into a movement of transformation, and she was just getting started. The legacy of change. The months that followed the summit were a whirlwind of progress and challenges. Maya Anderson's partnership with the airline grew deeper, transforming not just the company, but also the lives of its employees and customers. Her initiatives, both cultural and operational, became a benchmark for corporate responsibility and inclusivity. But Mia wasn't content to stop there. She had seen firsthand how systemic change could ripple outward, and she was determined to leave a legacy that would outlast her. A critical milestone. Mia's first major project with the airline came to fruition with the rollout of a program called Service Beyond Borders. The initiative paired Anderson Biotech's portable diagnostic tools with the airline's global network, allowing medical supplies and volunteers to reach underserved regions faster and more efficiently. At the program's launch event, held at the airline's flagship hangar, a massive crowd gathered. Employees from all levels of the company stood alongside community leaders, healthcare professionals, and media representatives. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Robert Langston took the stage first, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Today, we're not just unveiling a program, we're redefining what it means to serve," he said. "This partnership with Dr. Anderson and her team at Anderson Biotech is a testament to what's possible when innovation meets purpose." When it was Mia's turn to speak, she stepped forward to thunderous applause. She took a moment to soak in the sight of the diverse audience before her. "This isn't just a launch, it's a promise," Mia began, her voice steady and resonant. "A promise that no matter where someone is born or what challenges they face, they deserve access to the care and respect that so many of us take for granted." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "But let me be clear, This is only the beginning. The true measure of success isn't in the applause we hear today, but in the lives we touch tomorrow." The crowd erupted into cheers as Mia stepped back from the podium, her heart swelling with pride. This was the culmination of years of perseverance, and yet she knew there was still so much more to do. A personal victory. After the event, Mia found a quiet moment in the hangar, away from the cameras and the crowds. She leaned against the railing of a maintenance platform, gazing out at the rows of planes that symbolized the airline's reach. Her assistant, Jordan, approached, holding a folder. "Dr. Anderson, there's something I thought you should see," he said, handing her the document. Mia opened the folder to find a handwritten letter from Layla, the young ground crew member she had spoken to at the summit months earlier. The letter detailed how Layla had taken Mia's words to heart, spearheading a peer-led mentorship program among the ground crew. The program aimed to build camaraderie and ensure every team member felt valued and respected. Mia smiled, touched by the impact of her efforts. She folded the letter carefully and looked at Jordan. "This is why we do it," she said, "not for the headlines or the awards, but for people like Layla." A confrontation with the past. Later that evening, Mia attended a private dinner with the airline's executive board. The conversation was celebratory, filled with praise for the day's successful event. Yet Mia couldn't ignore a lingering tension in the room. Toward the end of the evening, Robert Langston leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Mia," he began, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you. What drove you to insist on addressing the staff directly when we first partnered? Most people in your position would have focused solely on the executives." Mia's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. "Because culture starts from the ground up, Robert," she said. "When I walked into your airport that first day, I wasn't met with the respect or professionalism you claim to value. That experience wasn't unique to me. It's something too many people face every day. If we're going to change the system, we have to start at its foundation." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over the table. Robert nodded slowly, his expression one of quiet understanding. "Thank you for your honesty," he said. "It's a lesson we all needed to hear." The ripple effect. Months later, the impact of Mia's initiatives could be felt across the airline's operations. Employees at all levels began reporting improved morale and stronger teamwork. Customer satisfaction scores rose, and the airline earned widespread recognition for its efforts to prioritize respect and inclusivity. Even more remarkable were the stories emerging from the field. In remote villages and underserved communities, Anderson Biotech's diagnostic tools were saving lives. Volunteers shared photos and testimonials of families receiving care they had never dreamed possible, all made accessible through the airline's global reach. Layla's mentorship program became a model for other departments, and Beth and Greg, once symbols of the airline's culture issues, became outspoken advocates for change within their teams. A legacy cemented. 1 year after the partnership began, Maya returned to the airline's headquarters for a special ceremony. The company had decided to rename its employee training center the Mia Anderson Leadership Academy, in recognition of her contributions. As she stood before the crowd gathered for the unveiling, Maya felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had believed in the possibility of change and worked to make it happen. In her speech, she said, "This academy isn't about my name. It's about the values we've embraced together: respect, resilience, and the courage to challenge the status quo. My hope is that every person who walks through these doors carries those values with them into the world." The journey continues. As Mia boarded a plane later that evening, she reflected on how far she had come. The flight attendants greeted her warmly, addressing her by name and ensuring her comfort without a trace of hesitation or doubt. Sitting in her first-class seat, Maya looked out the window, watching the runway lights blur into streaks as the plane took off. She thought of her grandmother, of Layla, of all the lives touched by her work. Her journey wasn't over. There were still battles to fight and systems to transform. But in this moment, She allowed herself to feel the quiet triumph of knowing she had made a difference. And she knew, without a doubt, that the best was yet to come. The final flight. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane climbed into the night sky. Maya reclined her seat slightly, gazing out at the vast expanse of clouds illuminated by the moonlight. Her thoughts drifted back to the beginning of her journey, not just this trip, but the journey of her life. She thought of the quiet strength of her grandmother, who had taught her to hold her head high in the face of adversity. She remembered the countless times she had doubted herself, only to rise again, fueled by a vision greater than her fears. And now, as the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, she found herself reflecting on the legacy she had built and the path that lay ahead. A personal reflection. Jordan, seated across the aisle, leaned over slightly. "Dr. Anderson," he said softly, "you've done so much in the past year. Have you thought about what's next?" Mia smiled faintly, her eyes still fixed on the window. "I think about it every day, Jordan," she replied. "This partnership was just one chapter. There are still so many systems that need to change, so many people waiting for someone to fight for them." Jordan nodded, sensing the weight of her words. "You've inspired so many already. Whatever comes next, I know it'll be just as impactful." Mia turned to him, her smile growing warmer. "Thank you, Jordan. And thank you for being part of this journey. I couldn't have done it without your support." The impact beyond the horizon. As the flight attendants moved through the cabin offering drinks and snacks, Mia noticed how much had changed. The once dismissive tones were now replaced with genuine warmth and attentiveness. She smiled at one of the attendants, a young woman who had approached her earlier in the flight. "Dr. Anderson," the attendant said quietly, leaning closer, "I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done for this company. I started working here 2 years ago, and it wasn't always easy. But since the summit, things feel different, better." Mia's heart swelled with pride. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "It means the world to hear that. Keep being part of the change." The attendant nodded and moved on, leaving Mia with a sense of quiet fulfillment. The homecoming. When the plane touched down, Maya felt a familiar rush of anticipation. She stepped off the aircraft and into the terminal, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Waiting for her at the gate was a small group of her team, including Lila, Beth, Greg, and Robert Langston. "Mia," Robert began, his voice filled with warmth, "we couldn't let you arrive without a proper welcome." Layla stepped forward, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Dr. Anderson, this is just a small token of appreciation from all of us. You've changed not just how we work, but how we see ourselves." Mia accepted the flowers, her eyes misting slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "The truth is, you've all changed me too. This journey has been about all of us, and I'm so proud of what we've accomplished together." The final words. As the group walked toward the exit, Mia paused for a moment, turning to face them. "Before we part ways tonight, I want you all to remember something," she said. "This isn't the end. It's the foundation. Change doesn't stop here. It grows. And each of you has the power to keep it alive." Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply with the group. They nodded, their expressions reflecting both gratitude and determination. Mia turned toward the exit, her heart full and her mind already envisioning the next steps. As she stepped into the crisp night air, she felt a profound sense of peace. The fight wasn't over, but the victories along the way reminded her that every effort mattered. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to continue shaping a world where respect and dignity were the norm, not the exception. And as the city lights stretched out before her, Mia Anderson walked forward, knowing that her story was far from over. It was just beginning.